Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, feisty people. Sara Gross here. We are here with the third episode in our series about coaching youth. I'm here with co-host Jill Colangelo, who is a writer and researcher who studies the relationship between mental health and endurance sport. She currently works as a research affiliate in the Department of Forensic Psychiatry at the University of Bern, and she writes about mental health for Outside Media. Jill, hello, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good, Sarah. How are you?
I'm great. What's our third episode all about?
Our third episode is all about the athletes. So we've talked about the parents, we've talked about the coaches, and now we have directed this episode toward young athletes. And I had a great conversation with a guest who was able to bust some myths with me, to do a little true false, to share some stories. It was a fun episode.
You know, last night I sat down and watched the interview with you and Keely. Really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to share it with our audience. Tell us about Keely.
Yeah, Keely Henninger, she's great. She is a medical student at Oregon Health and Science right now. She is also a professional trail and ultra runner. She has been with many other big teams before, but she's with Ultra right now. And she and I collaborated on a paper recently for peer review that I'm really excited about on the topic of REDS, which is relative energy deficiency in sport. And we had a really fun conversation, which I hope you all enjoy listening to. And we're going to hear that right after the break.
Hey, feisty people. CEO Sara Gross here. I want to tell you about my favorite product for muscle strength and recovery, which has also become a favorite amongst all of my friends at CrossFit, Prevenex's Muscle Health Plus. A few months ago, I started using it during my lifting sessions. We call it Red Juice at CrossFit, and it has helped my power, speed, and I've even put on some muscle mass, which has typically been really, really hard for me as an ex-endurance athlete. Muscle Health Plus contains creatine monohydrate, of course, but it also contains branched-chain amino acids and essential amino acids, plus some even more cutting-edge ingredients like HMB and estrogen, all of which are scientifically shown to increase muscle growth, recovery, and strength. So basically, it's a convenient, all-in-one formula that goes way beyond creatine alone. Unlike most supplement brands, Prevenex tests everything with pharmaceutical-grade precision, and they also offer a 100% money-back guarantee. Try Muscle Health Plus today, and you can get 15% off your first order with the code PERFORMANCE at Prevenex.com. That's PERFORMANCE for 15% off at Prevenex.com.
Hi, Keely. I'm so excited that you could be here with us today.
Hi, Jill. I'm so excited to be here too.
So I have a question before we get started. Why are you the right person to talk about boneheaded things that athletes do?
That is a great question. I think that it's a funny topic to me because one, I've been a professional athlete now for 7 years and was a high school athlete, and I've done so many boneheaded things myself. But I've also gotten opportunity to coach a lot of athletes. So I get to see other athletes who make similar mistakes, but I also get to guide them through those mistakes and hopefully use some of my own mistakes to help them avoid making the same ones that I did. And then I've also worked in exercise science research for the last almost decade now, covering everything from training algorithms that increase athletes' performance to hormonal imbalances that might impact something like menstruation and performance and breast balance in a sports bra, and like looking at all these parameters that make athletes who they are from a really holistic lens, I think gives me a really cool perspective on things that impact athletes and things that we think impact us that maybe don't.
That is perfect. And that's exactly why I invited you to come talk to me about this stuff. I thought we could get things kicked off with a little bit of a true false here. So you and I are going to go back and forth, and we're going to say some things that we've either heard people say, or maybe we have thought ourselves in the past, or just kind of like floating around in the world of athletics, especially when you're younger. And we're going to go back and forth and talk about whether or not they're true or false. So I will start off with a banger to you, which is true or false, Keely. Lighter body weight is always better as an athlete, particularly a runner.
I mean, this in my brain is a no-brainer. It's a false. And there's many studies that actually show this as well, right? But I'd say like even just taking off my scientific hat, like lightness does not always make you faster because you need to be running in a body that is true to your own. And so if you're trying to just be lighter, that might not be natural for your body. You might be sacrificing muscle, you might be sacrificing energy. And so that does not necessarily make you faster. However, I think that is a pretty common connotation these days in the sport of endurance athletics, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're so right about that. That's a good. I'm glad we hit that one right off the bat. Okay, hard work is over. Next, I know you have a true false for me.
Okay. Breakfast is unnecessary.
Ooh, I love this question. As a breakfast lover, I am unbiased, but the truth is that breakfast, if that's false, breakfast is necessary. And one of the main reasons why is because our cortisol is high in the morning. That's a stress hormone, which is normal, right? And that's okay. That's the stuff that wakes us up in the morning. And it is connected to circadian rhythm, right? So the sun comes up, the light comes out, and it's a normal human process. But if our stress hormones remain too high for too long, we could get ourselves in trouble when it comes to managing our menstrual cycle, because that is considered an additional stress. And so the best way to take care of that problem is to eat breakfast within 1 hour of waking up. And by the way, that doesn't need to be like a massive breakfast. It can be just a few hundred calories of a couple of macronutrients together to put in your belly, something easily digested if you're going to go out and run after that. And if not, you can break up breakfast a couple of times. I know like some people like second breakfast, and that's a great way to go. But breakfast in the morning, totally necessary.
I mean, I couldn't agree more.
Are you one of those people, like, do you go to bed at night thinking about, you're excited about breakfast the next morning? Because I do.
Oh, 100%. My coffee and my breakfast is the reason I go to sleep.
100%. Okay, perfect. I love this. Okay.
Yeah.
True false for you is it is okay to skip a period sometimes.
Oh, this one's a tricky one because I don't think it deserves a binary answer of true or false, because I think there's a lot of reasons that someone could skip a period. But I think if I was going to go like it's okay to skip a period sometimes as a general mindset, that's probably false, because I don't think you should view like, oh, I skipped a period this month and then maybe a couple months later, oh, I skipped another period as okay. I think that should be overall like kind of cause for concern. I think in my experience and a lot of experiences of some of the athletes I've coached, typically when your body doesn't have a period and it has been having periods, it's typically a warning sign. And I think as female athletes or athletes who menstruate, I think that's one of our superpowers, is that we actually get that warning signal from our body that potentially something is wrong. And, really heightened periods of stress could trigger your body to forego menstruation that month. Similar with training, really, really intense changes in training or differences in energy balance could have your body result in an absence of menstruation for that month. And so I do think that you can use it as a sign to reevaluate your current training, your current energy demands, your current stress levels in other parts of your life, and use it as a sign to be like, okay, am I doing everything right? And, if your answer is yes, then you can investigate it a little more, right? But if your answer is no, which for a lot of athletes, it might be no in one of those avenues, then I think it's a reason to maybe pump the brakes a little bit, take a better look at what those imbalances are and try to fix those so that you can get your cycle back on track. Because I think, skipping a period every once in a while can lead to amenorrhea, where you're skipping a period often. And we know that that has a lot of detrimental effects on female athletes, especially on like long-term bone health and metabolic health and things that we want to avoid for longevity's sake. So yeah, I think having the mindset that it's okay to skip a period sometimes is probably bad, but I do think there's going to be nuance to skipping a period on some occasions, but I'd say the majority of the times it's a red flag that you should probably take a good look into.
Right. That's awesome. Such a good answer. The whole way you frame that. It's true, because it is information and it's a good way to be proactive. So that's really good stuff. Okay. Next.
Okay. This one's near and dear to my heart right now because I feel like I'm asking myself this question often. Okay. So it's more important to get up early to train than it is to sleep.
Okay. This one is a tough one. And actually, you're probably the better person to answer this, but I'm going to give the non-professional athlete answer. And then if you want to jump in with the professional athlete answer, I'd be happy to hear that. In my personal opinion, and from what I've seen from the athletes that I have worked with, the research will tell us that when you are sleeping is when you get the most opportunity for recovery. So you get your beautiful blasted growth hormone, provided that you're sleeping deeply at night. And that is an excellent opportunity for your body to repair a lot of the damage that you do as an athlete. And that's normal, right? As an athlete, we're going to damage some muscle tissue. And then through recovery, we're going to adapt. The adaptation phase is how we get stronger. So if you do not sleep enough, you do not get the opportunity for your body to go through that process of recovery and for your body to renew itself and get stronger. So missing out on enough sleep can really add up over time. The other part about that is that when you don't get enough sleep, that's an additional stress overall to the body. And cognitive stuff just doesn't work well when you're sleeping, when you don't sleep enough. So even though your performance may lag, you may be fatigued. Yes, that's part of it, but also, and you're missing out on the recovery. But there's also the mental side too, where you're just not going to be clear the next day, especially if you're a young athlete. You're not just an athlete, you're a student. You've got a million things to do, and we need to be at our freshest. So as much as it is important for you to get your training in, especially when you're a young person, especially when you're juggling so many things, and trying to keep your body and mind healthy, it is better for you to sleep in a little than it is for you to get that run in. Tell me, what do you think about that, Keely?
I think you're spot on. And I think a lot of athletes who maybe are on their way up the trajectory towards professional athlete or athleticism, or if they are just running as a parent with a full-time job and all these things, I don't think they know exactly how much professional athletes actually sleep and do nothing. And I think if they knew those stats, they would be shocked and really reevaluate their own sleep. Like, I'd say it's the number one thing you can do if you want to improve your performance is take a holistic view at your sleep. And most people aren't sleeping 8 hours a night. And I think that it is a really easy way to improve your performance by just increasing the amount of time you're sleeping, giving your muscles a chance to recover, improving all of those things that you don't get the chance to if you aren't getting adequate sleep. And yeah, I think when you're talking about student athletes, it's one thing that's really underemphasized, at least when I was in college, was the importance of sleep and thinking about how much cognitive ability you need for the classroom, how much athletic ability you need for the sports field, and then how much cognitive ability you need for the sports field. Like, you're going to need so much sleep, and no college athlete is getting a ton of sleep, at least not in my day. We were not. And so I think really emphasizing it for that age group is so, so important, because you need a lot of mental energy to fight during those hard hard games, hard running events, all of those things. And if you don't have adequate sleep, your mental fight is just not going to be there. And so, yeah, I think sleep is if you're asking yourself right now, okay, whether you're a college athlete wanting to increase your mileage, or say you're an everyday runner who is a mom of 3 and is a full-time worker, and right now you're on this debate with yourself if you want to increase your mileage because you want to get fitter, or you can do something else. I would first just take a holistic view at your sleep. And if that is lacking, I would just start there. And I think if you get some consistent sleep for weeks, you'll actually just see an increase in performance, and you won't even have to increase the mileage.
I love that. That is so good. And so a little word here about sleep hygiene is that according to a recent survey, and I wish I could cite it, I don't have it off the top of my head, but the number one reason why young people are not getting enough sleep is because of the phone in their face when they're trying to go to bed. So a little word of caution there to really think about disconnecting before you get in bed, and really consider whether or not that last text message is worth sending, because your sleep is precious and that phone is going to be a big distraction. Mm-hmm. Okay. We are on to the next one. Let's see. This is a good one. So this one is perfect for you to answer, please, because you have a long enough career that you'll be able to answer this. If I am a fast runner at X weight, a particular weight, I have to stay at that weight to be successful. True or false?
I think that's false. Definitely false. I think, well, let's just acknowledge that the comparison trap is real. So I think that a lot of people do compare themselves to themselves. And so thinking oh, I had this time at this weight or this age, I want to do that again. I have to do that same thing. That's so common. We all think that all the time. It's like, oh, what was I doing 2 years ago when I had that really good race? Let's try to do that thing the exact way I was doing it then. I think if we're backing up to the root of this question, where it's like, does X weight at any given time equal the same speed? The answer is no, is because especially for people who go through puberty, your body composition is constantly changing over those years, that your weight is also going to fluctuate. And that weight might change just due to the increase in muscle mass or a decrease in muscle mass. And that doesn't mean that that weight is tied to your speed at that time. And I think a lot of people, especially those who are going through puberty, trying to stay at that same weight, they're like disrupting themselves for later, right? Like they're trying to get around puberty and not let puberty happen to them, but that will just have negative impacts later. And then I think we have to acknowledge that as we get older, our body composition will continue to change. We might be able to hold on to more muscle. We might be a phenotype that doesn't hold on to as much muscle. But I think the key is really just like listening to yourself, getting adequate sleep, getting adequate training, keeping an energy balance, and letting your weight settle at whatever it needs to settle where you feel amazing and you're running at your best then. And that number is not going to be necessarily the same as it was when you were 18 or 25 or 33, but that doesn't mean you can't be faster at all of those ages. So I think it's a little bit of a nuanced question, because I think that there's some studies that have shown like, oh, look at this weight class, they're the fastest. But then when you really dive into the weeds, there's no difference among different weights. And for given runners, there's like kind of a spread across energy balance and weight and all of these things where there's not one straightforward answer. You could be a certain weight and be on the like heavier side of your own weight trajectory and be way faster than you were at a lighter weight. And so there's just no like real concrete answer to weight equals success. And so I'd say like just listen to your own body and don't try to force it to look like a mold that you think you should.
Right. I think that's so important to recognize the fact that bodies are going to change along the lifespan. They're going to change along a week, a month, a year, particularly as a woman. And that is okay. I think that our culture is very resistant to change, especially when it comes to bodies. And as I like to say all the time, a body that doesn't change is a dead one. Your only time your body is not going to change is when it's no longer alive. So you have to be comfortable with the fact that things are going to be in flux all the time, because that is what it is to be a human being on this earth.
Yeah. And I think like even just one more thing to add on to that, it's like, even if we can make the brains of young adolescent athletes realize that, I think it also needs to go diffuse into the coaching system. Because I think, if you're really fast as a 10th grader and you look a certain way, and then you go through puberty and you come back and you're not as fast, and your coach is wondering why you're not so fast, why you look different, all of these things, and they're not working with your changing body to optimize what you need for those years, you're going to want to fight it, right? Because you feel ostracized all of a sudden. You feel like you're letting your coach down. You're wondering why you're not as fast. And so I think it's like letting athletes know it's okay, but then also reminding coaches that this is really important, and that just because someone's really fast one year and then they have a down year doesn't mean they can't be fast later. So don't lose hope on them, and don't make them feel like they should be embarrassed with their changing body. Like, let them embrace it, adapt the training so that they can actually be fast with their changing body, instead of feel like the changing body is limiting their speed.
Such a good point. And actually, the episode before this one, we had a coach on that actually talked about the initiatives that they've implemented at his school to talk to young athletes about precisely this. And we talked, if anyone hasn't listened to the previous episode, please go check it out, because we hit this topic specifically about changing coaches' mindsets around what it takes to be a successful athlete. So that is a really good one. Okay. So next true or false, what do we have?
All right. Are you wanting one around amenorrhea, or do you want one more about carbohydrates and fruits and veggies? What are you feeling?
Let's get into food.
Right. Okay. True or false? Fruits and vegetables do not provide adequate carbohydrates.
Interesting one. This one's gonna probably upset a lot of people, but fruits and vegetables certainly are carbohydrates. But unfortunately, they did not have the type of consistency of the starchy carbohydrates that your brain, particularly the female brain, really wants. And the reason why this is because we have carbohydrate needs that are very different than males. We just do. Our brain needs to have enough of a starchy carbohydrate for our hormones to function properly. And again, without getting too far in the weeds scientifically, we just know that a female athlete, even if she is eating adequate calories, we know that if she is low in carbohydrates, specifically starchy carbohydrates, that it is likely, or it is very possible, that she could have disruption in her menstrual cycle because of what's called the HPA axis dysfunction, which is what happens when your endocrine system gets really cranked out by your very lousy decisions about what to put in your mouth. Sorry, that's the way it goes. When you take those carbohydrates in, you want to be looking for those starchy carbohydrates. So that's your pasta, your bread, your bagels, your cereal, your even rice and quinoa. They can be gluten or gluten-free. It does not matter. We don't want to be too precious about what we're getting in our bodies. We're just going to make sure we get adequate amount of starchy carbohydrates in for energy and good functioning endocrine system.
Right. Yeah. I think like when you talk to athletes, when they're thinking about what they want to eat for a meal, they're thinking like, oh, this salad will be my meal. And it's like, that's a great part of your meal.
Sure.
But like, if you wanted to get, say, even like 20 grams of carbs from like broccoli, you need to eat 4 to 5 cups of it. You know what I mean? It's just like, you need so much quantity, and your body just can't eat that much fiber. That's just not possible, right? So I think it's like, we're not saying,
it's not going to be pretty.
Right, yeah. It's like, we're not saying don't eat fruits and vegetables. It's like, eat a ton of those, but that's not like going to be your main carbohydrate source, because there's just no way to really eat enough. And again, they're not quite the right source. So it's like, yeah, I think that's the common misconception, though, is just like people think, oh, a salad is my meal only. But like, you need to add carbohydrates to that salad. The vegetables are not going to be enough on their own.
Absolutely. Okay. So how about we do 1 or 2 more questions, and then we're going to transition to the second part of our conversation. But how about, should we stay on we'll stay on the food stuff for a minute?
Sure.
So, is an energy bar a good substitute for a meal?
No. I will caveat that if you're one that has multiple breakfasts, maybe it can count as one of them.
Perfect.
But it definitely can't be like your only breakfast, your only lunch. I do think they serve a great purpose. I think every athlete should have energy bars stashed in their car, in their backpacks, in their purses, because in between classes, or in between, class to practice, or whatever, you're on the run and you're hungry, it's great to have them. But yeah, they don't substitute for a meal. I think they lack the satiety of a meal, right? So you're not going to be fulfilled from it, but also they lack the calories and the diverse nutrition needs that you have as an athlete. And so I'd say I would try to not have them as a straight meal source, but I fall victim to this, especially mornings where I'm really busy. Like, I'll have my first breakfast before my run, and then sometimes like the bars will hold me over till my early lunch or my third breakfast or whatever, comes first. But it's not going to be the only thing you have in the morning, because that's just not enough calories for the kind of thing you're putting your body through. But yeah, I think they're a great thing to have on hand, but not a meal. Even the ones that say they're a meal bar, they're not a meal.
Everyone did hear her just say third breakfast, right? Everyone caught that? She did say third breakfast. I knew I liked you. So yeah, and one more little note here is that, take a look at the energy bar that you're actually purchasing or consuming. If you cannot pronounce most of the ingredients on the label, there could be a better choice for you out there. And I know that, cost is an issue and access is an issue, but do try to take a look at the labels of the stuff that you're eating. If you see bars that have a lot of, just like I said, unpronounceable stuff, or just fillers and junk and things, just be careful of that. Also, low carbohydrate bars, things like, anything that looks to be just like a protein bar or something that's very low in carbohydrates, it's not going to help you at all. So just be wary of, an intelligent shopper with some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
I have another one that's a little bit more on training that I feel like we could pivot to and get off the carbohydrate topic.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Taking a couple of off days makes you lose fitness.
Oh my goodness. This is an excellent one. I remember, this will definitely help us transition into the next part of the conversation. I remember when I used to think this way. And I wish that I had known that the truth is that your performance gains happen on your rest days. I'm going to say it again. Your performance gains happen on your rest days. They don't happen on the days that you're actually training. That's not when all those gains are happening. They're happening when your body gets a chance to adequately rest and recover to prepare you. And again, that adaptation word, right? We adapt from the work that we've done so that the next time we go out, we get stronger. And if we don't take rest days, that recovery process cannot happen to the degree that it's supposed to happen. And over time, that can not only cause a detriment to our performance, we're kind of cheating ourselves because we're going out there and working hard, right? But then we're not reaping the benefits because we're not stopping long enough to let our body actually adapt, which is what it's meant to do. So it is absolutely not the case that it's the wrong thing to do. In fact, rest days are necessary. You should have at least one rest day a week, if not more. And I will also follow that up by saying having an off season is an incredibly important part of your training year, because if you don't give your body the chance to have that downtime to recover, you're also being cheated from your performance. But working hard is great when it's time to work hard, but resting hard is even better. And by the way, one little side note is an active recovery day is not a thing. A recovery day, a rest day is a rest day. There's no active rest day. Rest is rest. Active is active. The two don't, we can't, have a rest day from running by going rock climbing. We don't do that. That's not how that works. So.
Yep, I can appreciate that.
Okay. So I just from the last 10 minutes we have here together, would like to know if you would be willing to share with us. I asked you to come up with a list of kind of dumb things you did as an athlete, either as a younger person or hey, as an adult, because it's never too late to be stupid. So I thought maybe you and I could share some of the silly things that we've done along the way. You and I have both admitted to being boneheads at different point in time. So let's go for it. Keely, if you'd like to start, tell me about one silly thing you did as an athlete.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to go back to my basketball days, and I would say I put way too much of my self-worth into sport, but not only sport, but my sports success. And I think that was relatively boneheaded because when something goes wrong, it feels like your whole world is over, and it shouldn't be that. And you are more than your sport. You're more than your good days at your sport. You're more than your bad days at your sport. And I think emphasizing that to young athletes whose world feels so small is so very important. And I wish that I had a different outlook on sport when I was young, because, when I ended up not being able to play basketball in college, I spiraled. And I want kids that have maybe something really bad happen in their sport to not spiral as bad as I did, and to be able to be like, no, I'm a person outside of my sport. My sport makes me happy. I like being good at my sport, but it doesn't define me in my entirety. And I have other things that can define me, make me happy, make me a full person. And so, yeah, I think that was a little bit of a boneheaded thing, but it's super common.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Well, one of the silliest things I ever did was I was training up for a 3-day race, and I was so insecure about it. And I was so afraid that I wasn't going to be able to complete the distances that I was doing almost the 3 days that I would be doing racing, almost the same amount of volume I was doing in training repeatedly leading up to the race. And I think it's a very common thing, especially as a younger person, to feel that we can't trust our training, particularly when we have a coach who is telling us that if we're going to run a particular distance, that the training for that particular distance should be much less. And I think it's really hard to have faith in that process. And I know that I could not have faith in I couldn't have faith in the process, and I couldn't have faith in myself. Mm-hmm. So of course I ended up burning out, never even making it to the race, because you can't just repeatedly beat yourself up like that heading into a big event. So the idea of overtraining for a purpose it just, I think it's a common inclination because you feel like, oh my God, I got to make sure I can do this. But it is absolutely, it was one of the dumbest things I ever did. I have to be honest.
Been there.
Yeah. Do you have another?
Definitely. Okay, so when I first started running, I met a group of people who told me that they weren't having their period. And so my next goal for the next year was wanting to lose my period, getting to the point of losing my period, and then kind of thinking it was this like badge of honor. That's not cool. That's not okay.
Yeah.
But it was, the narrative I was told as a young aspiring runner. You're going to latch on to the narrative you're given, especially if it's told to you by people you look up to or people who are faster than you. And so, unfortunately, yeah, I thought it was a successful thing to lose my period. And so that's kind of the thing I rolled with for a while. It was like, okay, I'm doing enough to lose this. So that means I'm training enough.
Right. Do you mind sharing how long you lost your period for? How long you were without one?
I would say I can't recall the exact longest one-time period. I think it was around 2 years, but I'd say off and on where I'd have long stretches kind of like that off from when I was 18 till I was 25. So a good amount of time where in the midst of theirs, I would have a ligamentorrhea, which is like, I'd have my cycle. It would be super irregular. I'd skip it for a couple months. It'd come back. But yeah, I had a couple years when I first started where I lost it for a couple years completely. Um, my mom was trying to get me to go on birth control. It was very unhealthy. Got it back a little bit, would kind of go ebb and flow with it for a while. And then I've had it now really consistently for the last 3 or 4 years, but really started getting everything in line when I was like 25, 26, where I started getting it more consistently. And it was still irregular in the sense that some months it would be 30, then 40, then 30, but it was slowly trending to getting back to normal. But I think that's another thing that's maybe not something I did wrong, but you have to realize that if you're continuing to train and you're not taking time off from, say, a long time of amenorrhea and like really unhappy body on really bad energy balance, your period might not just come back right away. And I think I was unwilling to take a lot of time off. And so it took a lot longer for me to get mine back while trying to keep training because I was never like, in energy surplus. And so I think looking back, it's like, no, it would have just been way better probably to take a couple months off, get it back, and then try to increase training to not make it go away, right? And like just slowly increase training instead of like refusing to give up the training to try to get it back. But that's hard to do too.
It is hard to do. And just in solidarity, I will tell you that it is understandable that as a young athlete, you went through a moment like that. What's not as easily understandable is how I went through the same thing in my 30s. So I also lost my period somewhere. I should say, you know what? Let me not use the passive voice. I actually, I was responsible for losing my period in my 30s, and I didn't have it for 5 years. Mine was related to the idea that I was diagnosed with celiac disease when I was 25, and I was gluten-free until I became an ultramarathoner. I was fine. I was replacing enough carbohydrate with a gluten-free diet, but I did not realize that training as an ultramarathoner and the sheer amount of volume that you're covering, what I was eating was not enough. I was not replacing carbohydrates adequately. I guess that's why it's a hot button issue for me. And I was without a period for 5 years. You would think that I would have stopped after 6 months or so of consistent no period and said, gee, I should probably go see a registered dietitian about this. However, I did not. And it is true, and I think you and I will both agree that these decisions that we make do have an effect on our health over time. And this would be probably the subject for another entire podcast between you and I. But I think we would both agree that if we could, we'd go back and change our actions on that.
Absolutely.
Oh boy, if I knew then what I know now, right?
Totally.
Unfortunately, yeah, I'll never get a chance to do it over. But hopefully the listeners of this podcast will learn from our ridiculousness and also some of the true and false. And honestly, Keely, this has been a great conversation. I hope that maybe we can do another deep dive someday on our experiences with amenorrhea and what that was all about, because I bet lots of people would like to hear that conversation. So hopefully maybe we can do that in the future. Thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Thanks for having me. It was so fun to chat with you.
Jill, I really love the way that conversation was set up with Keely. Like the true or false questions, as well as like the boneheaded moments. I related to a lot of what you two were saying. And I do remember when it was considered a badge of honor, like losing your period was considered a badge of honor. I can remember one of my early training partners, like early in my triathlon career, training partners was an ex-national team runner in the UK. And she ran on Paula Radcliffe's training team, you know, like with the same coach. I kind of really admired her, thought she knew what she was doing. And she's the one who said to me, like, oh, what? You get your period? You're not training hard enough? And I realized, like, I don't honestly, she's one of my closest friends. Like, I don't hold her responsible at all. Like, that is what people thought.
Yeah.
Like, not to be, but like, that's what everybody thought, because it was so common, especially in the running world in particular, to lose your period.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I think it was more of a conversation. I should say, no, it wasn't a conversation at all. It was something that was really happening more when you and I were like in that high school, college age, because there was nothing to combat that. There was nothing to go against that and say, well, wait a minute, hold on, let's think about it. It's like, no, that was just what it was.
I also, you know, it's interesting you were talking about like the boneheaded things that you do.
Oh yeah.
And there's part of me that wants to push back on that a little bit, like to go, I mean, I think for good reason. That's why I wanted to like throw it by you. Where like, I wasn't the one who was boneheaded. I was told this stuff. Like, this is what I was taught. So it's that, like, actually that balance between realizing like boneheaded means I'm taking ownership of the mistakes that I made, which is an important part of the process, right? But also, it's like there was an entire culture built up around that told us the things we were supposed to do. So a lot of the mistakes I made, if I think about it, I was following expert advice, whether that was a dietitian, nutritionist, a coach. You know, I can remember doing very strange things in training where we were intentionally not eating carbs for 24 hours to have glycogen depletion. I don't know if you remember these studies.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And like it was a single leg study.
Yeah.
That where like one leg had carbohydrate and the other one didn't for a day. Yeah. I don't even know how they set up that study, but it was supposed to mean that you got like super compensation if you depleted yourself more in a training environment. You depleted your glycogen more and you got the super compensation, which, you know, might be true or have some validity. But what it meant that it was that in practice, once a week, we were not eating carbs for 24 hours and doing like 3-hour runs and 6-hour bike rides and stuff like that. So like it was boneheaded. But
yeah, it was stupid. Definitely. And what you're saying is true. It's like we were following the lousy advice that we got, but also we were in many cases not getting any advice at all.
Right.
So it was just either an absence of advice, and so we would just be left to our own devices, or it was that the advice we were getting was just really not good and really just scientifically incorrect and just absolutely not. Also, as we both know, most of that research wasn't done on women anyway. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's many reasons for those decisions that we made that were not very good.
For sure. And I think if I'm going to draw a lesson into today, it's like, it's not just 20 years ago that boneheaded advice existed.
Correct.
Right? It's also now. Yes. And so I think, and this comes to like, I think if I was going to name my take ownership of my boneheadedness.
Please do. Please do.
I would say, like, broadly speaking, I wish I had trusted myself more. Like, I wish I had, like, I knew that I felt better training when I was fueled. I knew that, like, there were some things where I knew that my body wasn't functioning properly, like, before I found out I was celiac. I had all kinds of signs that like something else was wrong, you know? And yet I had people telling me, oh, calories in, calories out. Like that's the equation, you know? Whereas I was randomly, I'd be super puffy, you know, or then I'd get real skinny. Like when I look back, I think, oh yeah, I was definitely absorbing food on and off, depending on how much gluten I was taking in. And how dead my villi were at any given moment, right?
Yeah.
But like, So I just kind of wish I had trusted myself a bit more and said, this is what works for me. Taken more rest when I needed it, eaten more when I needed to. And I think that there might be a different set of circumstances for younger athletes now, but that you cannot go wrong if you get to know yourself and your own body and what works.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that being said, though, it's really hard for a young athlete, especially now, because listening to your body is not really intuitive anymore. I think a lot of their thought processes and maybe even instincts are being overridden by just the absolute deluge of information they're getting from social media, from friends, from people online, all this different stuff. And I think that if you are to Google, like, why am I tired running, you're just as likely to get information that says, well, you need to push harder, or your diet is wrong, you need to maybe do your cardio fasted, or you're just as likely to get that kind of junk information as you are to get maybe the one lone person who's going to say, well, if you're tired, you should rest. Because as I've said a million times over the course of these last 3 episodes, culturally speaking, I need rest is not something we're taught to listen to. And these kids are not taught to listen to it in school, in class, in their academic life, in their personal life, in their family life, and certainly not in athletics. So I love that message, and I wish we could instill it into young athletes, young students in general. But I think it's really hard to cut through what they're hearing all the time and really help them tune into what their body is saying. It's invaluable. It's an invaluable skill, because it's gonna, you know as well as I do, as you get older, as you mature, that is what you need to come back to when you get lost, because your body is going to change and everything, across your lifespan. Being able to tune into what you personally need and what your body is saying is a skill that needs to be developed and cultivated, because it is going to be what you rely on as you grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's a good call out, because I think if you are trying to learn about yourself and respond to what you need or trust yourself, like I suggested, to realize that, like, it's a very imperfect process and you're never going to fully get that, right?
That's
so
right.
Sometimes it's just a simple thing of, like, getting a second opinion about something, or there's just, like, little things you can do. You can never be completely intuitive about what your body needs at every given moment. That's just kind of an impossible task, but it is worth undertaking the process.
So I have plenty of boneheaded stories of my own. Being a young athlete in high school and in college, I only played sports for 1 year in college, because I was exactly that person who went into college thinking, I'm keen here to play soccer. I'm going to be doing this for 4 years, and then very quickly was like, I don't think I can handle all of this. And it wasn't related to breaking down from underfueling or eating disorder or anything like that. It just was that I bit off way more than I could chew, for sure. But I did have one experience my senior year of high school that is something I regret so much.
Okay, now I was so curious.
I've actually never talked about.
What are you going to tell us? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not, again, this is sort of a diversion away from the topic of, like I said, body image and eating and all this stuff. And it is something that I would love to share, because I would love for athletes to learn from me on this one. So my senior year in high school, I was going to be coach of my varsity, captain of my varsity lacrosse team. And heading out of winter season of sports, I was really feeling very low and lost. My college recruitment process and looking at what colleges I want to go to, what colleges were interested in me to play soccer. It was very, as I look back now, I think the word I would say is unfulfilling, because I knew I had this feeling that I missed the process. There was something about the process to look for college that I just missed out on. I think that my college counselor at school really underestimated me dramatically. He did not really help me in the process. And I was really feeling very adrift. I knew that I had chosen the wrong university to go into freshman year. And I was feeling really upset about it, but what could you do at that point, right? I think you've accepted admission somewhere and you're just really feeling, I was lost, totally lost. And my motivation for everything, academic and sports, really went in the toilet. And I have to say, back then, we're talking 1994, I don't think that my teachers or even my coach were equipped to really see what is going on with this girl. Like, she's an A student, she's in the honors courses, she's a varsity athlete. Why is she like not showing up for preseason practice? Why is she kind of like wandering around life right now? Mm-hmm. And I know there's that senior slump thing, and I was like, that'll never happen to me, but it did. And it hit me really hard. And I was really, really lost. And I didn't reach out to anyone, and no one really reached out to me about it. And I skipped lacrosse season. I bagged out.
Interesting. So were you playing multiple sports at that time?
Yeah. So at that time I was playing, soccer and lacrosse are my two big sports.
So you were looking at, I'm just trying to think about what went into that decision. So you were just kind of looking at your schedule and felt overwhelmed?
No, I just didn't feel like it. I really don't have, it's such a regret. And I can't even say, I think it's really important to leave space for, maybe I was feeling overwhelmed, or I was feeling overworked, or I had too many projects I had taken on, or too many AP classes, or I was really interested in taking on another. No, it wasn't any of that. Mm-hmm. I was screwing off after school with my friends, like in a parking lot. I wasn't even doing stuff that I was supposed to be doing. I was not behaving in the way that I normally did. And I guess my message with telling that story is that no matter how good I thought I was, and no matter how impervious I thought I was to like a slump or kind of falling off the wagon, as it were, with my academics and my athletic life, it did happen to me. And there's no shame in that if it's happening to you, if you're feeling that way heading into spring now of your senior year, there's no shame in that. But there are many more ways for you to talk to someone and get help and figure out what's going on. The infrastructure is there now in a way that it wasn't when I was a student. And so if you can't reach out to your parents, reach out to someone at your school, your coach, a counselor, anyone that you can get in touch with. Mm-hmm. The steep drop off like that is not normal. And it means that you need to talk to someone. And I didn't, because I didn't know. And that, again, 1994, it's like the dark ages, basically. Yeah. Wasn't the infrastructure. So there are many ways that we can make a mess out of things. And mine didn't happen to be with an eating disorder in high school, but it certainly was really dropping the ball big time as a senior.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I have a follow-up thought too, but I'm hearing echoes back to, I think we had this conversation in the last episode about the other adults in a young person's life who are not the parents, and how important those voices are.
Yeah.
And I, as you're telling your story, I thought, I can remember a couple significant moments where someone I respected, they weren't even necessarily a big part of my life, but someone I respected gave me advice, whether it's good or bad. And I really remember that advice, and I took it.
Yeah.
When I was in first year university, someone at a writing workshop told me, I wasn't sure what my major was going to be. And they said, if you follow what you love to do, you'll always end up in the right place. Mm. And I was like, that to this day, I'm like, that was good advice. Wow. That same person gave me terrible advice about several other things. Yeah. But I don't think she would have known the impact that she was having necessarily. So as grown-ups, which we mostly are now, or if anyone's listening, it's, just to think about the young people that are around you and how you might impact them with the things that you say too.
It's true.
Some of the things we've talked about, like not commenting on someone's body or the food they're eating, but thinking about how you frame your advice.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely.
I was thinking too, a time, you made me think of a time I regretted as well. I was a bit younger. I was in 9th grade. So I played soccer as well as a kid. And I was pretty decent at it. And at one stage, I found myself on 3 different teams when I was in ninth grade. So I was on like the school team, and then the like intramural team. That's where all my friends played. We had 3 girls teams, no, 4. And then we played each other. We play against like the surrounding cities, whatever. And then we had what was called like the all-star team, which was like a select kind of team where they plucked out all the best kids. And we went to other, like I remember going to tournaments in the US and stuff like that, right? And it was all kind of a lot. Like it was a lot of soccer playing. And I remember talking to my dad about it and saying, I don't know, like it feels like a lot. I'm not sure if it's too much. And then him asking me, okay, well, what do you want to do? And like the intramural league was where my friends played. And I was like, well, if that's where I want to be, I want to be with my friends. I was in ninth grade. And so I continued to play at the school, but I gave up the kind of like all-star team. And I look back on that and I think, no. I should have. What I wished had happened is that I wished there had been someone in my world, and my parents probably didn't know this or think of this, someone in my world to say, this is a choice that could affect the level of soccer that you are going to play as you get older. I did not know that. Right? So I think that, and then, I mean, subsequently my family moved to the Middle East and the level of sport went down, and I took up swimming and running and ended up being a triathlete, and it worked out. But I think there was something critical happening there in that decision that I don't think I fully understood. And a lot of those girls then who I played on that team ended up with NCAA scholarships and went to play in the US. And, and that was like kind of the highest level of women's soccer at that time.
Right. Sure.
I mean, I guess you could try to get on the national team. That would be, but there weren't pathways like there are now to pro sports.
Right.
I wish I had all the information, and I actually like think about that and do that with my own daughter. Like I just want her to have the information. It's like, it's not like I'm pressuring her to go a certain direction or excel to the level of being pro at whatever her passion is. She can have all the options, but she needs to know how her choices are going to affect, could affect her future. And so I always try to, she said to me one time, I don't need to try in school because I want to do music. And I said, well, you can go to university for music. And she, like, her face just changed, like she just needed a grown up to tell her that was something you could study at university.
Yeah.
And then she's like, what? What does that mean? I'm like, well, let me tell you. So, just that now she has the information. Right?
Yeah.
So as she's making decisions, with how hard to study, it might affect her a little bit. So,
right. I think there's something in there too about, let's figure that the people listening to this podcast right now are athletes in some capacity. And while some of us may be thinking about how to take it to college, how to take it beyond, some of us are thinking about, I don't know if I really am so interested in this, or maybe I just want to be kind of like I just want to do this for fun, or maybe I don't want to do it at all. And the thing I will say is that I think there's space for both. There's space for us to move forward and take it really seriously. There's also space for you to just have fun. Mm-hmm. And where it would be completely appropriate for you to be like, I want to play on the team with my friends. Or maybe I'm better at this one sport, but it feels really heavy when I do it. And it's competitive in a way that it doesn't make me feel good about myself, and it makes me feel stressed out. But if I play this other sport in the same season, it's less pressure and I'm actually having a better time. Like, we do not have enough space in our conversations with our kids about the fact that both of those are okay.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Because not everyone is the same, and not everyone needs the same things, and not everything is set up the same way. And I think that's one of the things that I struggle with when we always go back to this like college search and the college process, is that as much as our kids are so individual, the process feels really cookie cutter in a lot of ways, where it's like you're making this candidate, right? And you're like making a sandwich, and it's like we're adding the education, and then we fit in there, we're putting in a nice crunchy slice of athletics, and then we have the AP classes and the good test scores, and we're making like this perfect bite of a person. But they shouldn't all be the same. And so if you are not prioritizing sports in the same way that other people are, that doesn't make you a less viable candidate, and it also doesn't make you less of a person who has the possibility to enjoy sports all your life in a different way. So, there's only one professional athlete on this podcast right now, but yet we both enjoy sports now in our 40s, and I feel like we will beyond this. And even though I stopped playing sports after my freshman year, I still continued to have sport in my life in different ways. So it's not over when you put the cap and gown on and walk across the stage. That's not the end, is what I'm saying. There's much more life to live, and many more ways in which sport can come in and out of your life.
And I have to say, in the last couple of years, I've completely transformed my relationship with activity. Or it's just completely transformed is maybe an exaggeration, but it's definitely evolved. But also that kind of led me down the road. I've recently started taking a gymnastics class,
Nice.
And that's if I was not a kid who took gymnastics, right?
No, that is awesome.
But it's so fun. It's so fun to be in there with like all the mats and the safe landings.
Yeah.
And you can and I'm not even a risk taker, but it's just so fun.
Yeah.
Like every week. And I'm in an adult beginner class, so we were some of the things you took for granted as a kid, even like doing a cartwheel or forward roll, like you find yourself relearning those things and then pushing beyond.
Yeah.
So that's been fun. Yeah. And I also do hip hop classes. I think I've talked about that quite a lot on this podcast in general, but it's that's also really fun. And that's a brain body connection, right?
For sure.
That is. And you need to learn the choreography, but then also do it quickly, which really challenges me, even though I'm not like doing hard intervals. It's very challenging. So, that's my evolution.
That's amazing. It's super fun. It's fun to just like not care what people think, get out there, go to something new. I will say that's something to look forward to. I think that when I was younger, there's no way I was comfortable enough with myself to do a lot of the things that I do now. So that's another thing to look forward to, everybody. After a while, you're not going to really care what people think. So this is true, right? This can be a really difficult time when you're younger and you're trying to figure out who you are in the world. A lot of times we see ourselves in the context of what other people are or what we think they think of us. So when you get older, you do kind of get rid of some of that stuff, and it feels really good. Yeah. So I guess if we were to wrap up here and give younger athletes any bit of advice, what would you say is really fundamental that you would want a young athlete to know?
I think kind of still on the trust yourself piece, because you were smart to bring up the fact that like you're never going to fully get there, or it's like when we talk about intuitive eating or these types of things, it's like it's really hard to know what your body wants all the time. But yet I know that there are different moments where I think especially through my athletic career, where things could have been better if I just took a moment to go, that little intuitive voice in my head that was saying, that doesn't feel right. I don't think if I just leaned into that a little bit more, I think things would have gone a little bit better for me.
Yeah. I think that's really, really, really good advice. I think for me, the thing I would love for young athletes to know is that we change so much in our lives, but more than that, inside of us, there are so many possibilities, so that we are comprised of multifaceted, there's different aspects of us. We're like a mosaic, and there's so many different pieces and parts of us that are going to shine at different times. And we have so many possibilities. You're never going to be closed off. You're never going to be at the end of something. Even when you think it's over, it might not be. There's always a way for you to take a challenging situation, turn it around, face it differently, ask for help, maybe look at things from a different perspective. And I know that sometimes when you feel really down and you feel like everything is falling apart and there's no hope, about like, I didn't get into the school I wanted to, or this person broke up with me, or I did really badly on an exam, or, my parents want me to do this thing that I don't want to do, et cetera, et cetera. Even when you feel like you're up against the wall, there's a way through. There always is. And you are capable of so much more than you think. All of us are. So I just hope young athletes always keep in mind that the possibilities are just endless. They're inside you. You just have to be ready to listen and think and try and challenge yourself. But like I said, it ain't over till it's over. So keep moving forward.
Wonderful. Well, that seems like a great place to end our series, Jill. Thank you so much for the wonderful interviews that you shared. It's been a great 3 episodes.
It's been really fun. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I hope that everyone enjoyed this and learned a few things. It was really good to talk to everyone.